Facial diversity and infant preferences for attractive faces in the Langlois study.
Aims and hypotheses. The aim of the study overall was to replicate previous results with adult female faces and to determine if infant preferences extend beyond adult female faces to other types. The aim in Study 1 was to replicate previous results with adult female faces, to extend this to adult male faces, as well as to investigate whether the order of presentation affects preferences. The aim of Study 2 was to extend the findings to non-white faces, and the aim of the third study was to extend the findings to the faces of babies.
So the sample in Study 1, originally there was 110 6-month-old infants. This was later reduced to 60. This was because several were rejected for various reasons, including fussiness, computer error, experimenter error, and because the mothers saw the slides. There were 53 Caucasians, 5 Hispanic, 1 Black, and 1 Asian. There are 35 males and 25 females, all from middle-class families. Each infant was tested within 3 weeks of turning 6 months old, and the children were recruited from the Children's Research Lab at the University of Texas at Austin. This was an opportunity sample because it was convenient for the experimenters.
The sample of the second study was originally 43 6-month-old infants. It was later brought down to 40 6-month-old infants due to the reasons in the previous slide. There were 25 females, 15 males, 36 of them white, 2 Hispanic, and 2 black. In the third study, there were 39 6-month-old infants, 37 of them white, 2 Hispanic, there were 20 females and 19 males.
The method in this study was a lab experiment. 2 strengths of this is lab experiments have good control and are easily replicated. 2 weaknesses of lab experiments is they have low ecological validity and they can be reductionist.
Variables. In the first study, the independent variables included attractive and unattractive white female faces, attractive and unattractive white male faces, and infants who see either all men then all women, compared with infants who see altering men and women. In the second study, the independent variable was the attractive and unattractive black female faces, and in the third study, the independent variable was the attractive and unattractive male and female infant faces. The infant faces were pictures of 3-month-old infants. The dependent variable for all of the studies was the fixation time. This was the length in time that the infant looked at a face. Each face was presented twice, once on the left side of the screen and once on the right. The mean time for an individual face could be calculated, and as there were 2 observers, the agreement between them could be checked. This led to a higher inter-rater reliability.
So the controls for the experiment. Faces were controlled for expression, hair length, and hair color, and all men were clean shaven. Each child was sat 35 centimeters away from the screen on the parent's lap. Each parent wore occluded glasses. Each pair was presented twice, once with attractive face on the left and then again on the right. 2 experimenters observed each infant, which again, inter-rater reliability, 2 independent coders. And then the attractiveness of mothers was controlled.
General procedure. First, an infant was seated on a parent's lap 35 centimeters from the screen. A light flashed and a buzzer would sound to get the child's attention. Then, the first stimulus was presented and the infant's response was recorded. The same stimulus was then presented again, but with the 2 faces on opposite sides. The same procedure was repeated until all the slides in the study were complete. Then, the experimenters observed the gaze direction of the child and the length of time the infant looked at a face.
In-depth presentation. Study 1. 16 sets of stimuli were presented one after another, either all men first or all women first, or alternating for the order of presentation trials. The infant had a 5 to 10 minute rest. And then the 16 remaining sets were presented to complete all the sets of stimuli. In Study 2, all 8 sets of stimuli were presented one after another. There was no break because the number of stimuli had been reduced from 16 to 8 sets. In Study 3, as done for Study 2, all 8 sets of stimuli were presented one after another.
Results. Infants looked at attractive faces for longer than they looked at unattractive faces. This difference was significant. Boys looked at male faces for longer than they looked at female faces. This difference is also significant. Girls looked longer at female faces than male faces, but this one was not significant. No significant relationships were found between the attractiveness of the mother and sex of the infant, or the sex of the stimulus face or the attractiveness of the stimulus face. The order of presentation made no difference.
Conclusions. First conclusion, the findings of all 3 studies show that 6-month-old infants can discriminate between attractive and unattractive faces, and that they prefer attractive faces. In the second conclusion, the findings also show that babies are judging attractiveness irrespective of sex, age, and race of the faces. Exposure to cultural media does not seem to account for these preferences. Rather, preferences for attractiveness are either innate or acquired with only minimal experience of faces in the environment.
Evaluation. A strength of the study was that it was generalizable. It was tested on males, different races, and different ages, this being the 3-month-old infant faces and the adult faces. It was also a lab experiment, meaning it was highly controlled. This had to do with the parents wearing glasses, the infants being given breaks, and the experiment's high inter-rater reliability. The raters could not see the faces of the people being presented to the infants, and this ruled out any possibility of experimenter bias. They also made the infants focus prior to presenting the image with the light and the buzzer. The attractive and unattractive faces were randomized. The attractive and unattractive faces were presented on different sides of the slides. A few weaknesses of the experiment was that it lacked ecological validity because it wasn't a real-life situation, and there was a possibility of ethnocentric bias because there were more white babies than there were other races, and there were only black women in the second experiment.
This study relates to the developmental approach. This relates to the developmental approach because Langlois studies children and whether they are born with or whether they learn to recognize facial attractiveness. In a nature versus nurture debate, this study sides with nature because the babies had no outside influence due to their age and lack of exposure to the outside world. The study showed genetically that we are programmed to find the most symmetrical, attractive face for the unconscious purpose of reproduction.
Babies!